Darkness falls as the ancient flank of La Palma can no longer bear its colossal weight. 500 billion tons of rock slide into the ocean with the force of atomic bombs. The impact creates a massive wall of water, racing like a jet across the Atlantic. Miles away, Washington, D.C. sleeps peacefully, unaware of the deadly scythe rushing towards it. Suddenly, the eastern horizon turns black, a mountain of water blotting out the morning sun. Air raid sirens wail too late, mixing with the frenzied roar of the hungry ocean. The Washington Monument shakes violently before snapping like a dry twig under the water's force. The White House, seat of world power, is instantly swallowed whole by the ferocious wave. Military helicopters attempt a desperate takeoff, but are immediately swatted down by the swirling water. Government buildings collapse in sequence, crushed under the unimaginable pressure of the relentless water. Lincoln's majestic statue sits deep beneath murky water, surrounded by rubble and crushed cars. Arlington Bridge tears in two, flinging trapped cars down into the surging Potomac River below. The mighty Pentagon vanishes, leaving only a massive whirlpool sucking everything into the earth. Panicked crowds trample one another, fleeing for high ground, but the water is much faster. In minutes, the superpower's capital has turned into a vast, silent underwater graveyard. Tattered flags and history's fragments float aimlessly, telling the story of a civilization's collapse. This is no movie. It is a realistic scenario geologists have feared for decades. La Palma's fracture is a geological time bomb, and the clock is ticking to zero. When the 30-meter wall arrives, can modern technology save us from total extinction? Welcome to the end of Washington, D., where nature reclaims what rightfully belongs to it. Deep beneath the ocean, ancient cracks begin to groan, signaling the inevitable end arriving. Millions of massive rock blocks slide into the sea, triggering a deadly chain reaction. Released energy equals the entire world's nuclear arsenal detonating at the exact same moment. Washington, D.C. wakes up in morning sunlight, citizens enjoying their peaceful morning coffee cups. Service dogs at the White House suddenly bark loudly, sensing the distant tremors arriving. On the Potomac River, water levels suddenly drop low, revealing a muddy black bottom. At NOAA Center, screens flash red alarms. Scientists stand frozen in absolute terrifying fear. Phones across the city vibrate simultaneously with urgent messages. Evacuate immediately, seek high ground. Pedestrians stop walking, looking up at the horizon where a black wall stands tall. Time has run out. The tsunami shadow begins to swallow the capital's morning light. The mouth of Chesapeake Bay takes the first massive hit as the angry ocean slams into land. Water compresses into the narrow Potomac River channel, rising into a 30-meter wall of mud. The Francis Scott Key Bridge is the first victim, steel pylons groaning before being torn apart. Heavy trucks moving on the bridge are flung into the sky like cheap plastic toys. The water's shockwave travels ahead, blowing out the glass windows of high-rise riverside buildings. Reagan National Airport vanishes instantly, the runways becoming part of the churning seafloor. The wall of water enters the capital's center, carrying tons of concrete and shipwreckage. The Lincoln Memorial, the Temple of Freedom, stands alone facing the wrath of nature. Massive marble columns shatter into pieces as thousands of tons of water slam into the facade. Inside, Abraham Lincoln's statue stares straight at the flood before sinking into darkness. The reflecting pool bursts its banks, pool water mixing with seawater to form a deadly vortex. The World War II memorial is flattened, the fountains crushed under the immense pressure. Trees on the National Mall are uprooted, floating like matchsticks on the rushing torrent. The pencil-thin Washington Monument, the capital's beacon, begins to tilt dangerously to the side. A massive crack runs down the tower, the sound of breaking stone drowning out the waves. The tower's peak snaps off, falling freely and plunging into the churning water below. Water spills into Ellipse Park, heading straight for the south lawn of the White House. Agents shoot at windows to escape, but the water has already blocked every exit. The West Wing, housing the Oval Office, is smashed by a drifting city bus. Water breaches the White House main doors, flooding the hall and washing away historic portraits. The low-lying Pentagon becomes a funnel, catching the full force of the incoming flood. The Pentagon's central courtyard turns into a massive whirlpool lake, sucking everything down. The Washington metro system begins to flood, turning tunnels into high-pressure water pipes. At Metro Center Station, water erupts from escalators like severed arteries spurting blood. A moving train is caught by the water, slamming hard against the dark tunnel walls. Above ground, wide avenues turn into fast-flowing rivers filled with dangerous debris. The Air and Space Museum's glass shatters, causing suspended aircraft to crash down. Dinosaur skeletons at the Natural History Museum are washed away, bones scattering in the water. The Library of Congress, humanity's knowledge vault, floods with mud and salt water. The white Capitol dome stands out against the Black Sea, awaiting its final judgment. A massive cargo ship, swept away by waves, hurtles straight towards the Capitol building. The ship's bow collides with the building's south wing, creating an explosion of concrete dust. The dome structure begins to crack, fissures spreading like a giant spider web. The Statue of Freedom atop the dome shakes, then falls, disappearing into the water. The entire dome collapses inward, creating a column of water and dust hundreds of meters high. Historic Georgetown is completely wiped out, red brick houses vanishing into thin air. Key Bridge's collapse severs gas lines, causing massive explosions on the water surface. Black smoke columns rise from the water, merging with the ash-filled gray sky. George Washington University Hospital floods to the third floor, doctors looking out in despair. Nationals Park Stadium becomes a massive reservoir, seats floating aimlessly on the surface. Luxury hotels along the Potomac have foundations shattered, collapsing like houses of cards. The city's power grid fails, plunging Washington, D.C. into darkness and cold water. On surviving rooftops, survivors wave their hands in hopeless desperation for rescue. A floating fire truck, lights still rotating, illuminates the murky water surface. Statues of notables in National Statuary Hall sink, history being erased by the flood. Gold and money vaults at the Treasury Department are crushed by water pressure. A massive, torn American flag drifts past the ruins of the White House. From space, Washington, D.C. is no longer a metropolis, but a new bay. The tsunami passes, leaving a deadly silence blanketed over the ruined Capitol. This is the price paid when humans think they can control nature. The nightmare continues as the second wave strikes, higher and more brutal than the first. The second wave carries shipwrecks and containers, turning them into massive, deadly projectiles. The city's sewage system bursts, forcing black wastewater to surge back up onto the streets. Substations explode in sequence, creating blinding blue fireballs amidst the vast sea of water. The power grid fails completely, turning skyscraper elevators into trapped iron coffins. At the National Zoo, panicked wild animals break cages, swimming desperately in the flood. Massive elephants try to cling to high ground, trumpeting sorrowful sounds of distress. Arlington Cemetery suffers landslides, white coffins washed away by the relentless currents. National Archives flood. The Constitution and Declaration of Independence sink deep into the mud. Communication signals are cut, leaving the city completely isolated from the outside world. The Capitol Beltway jams, thousands of stalled cars becoming metal tombs for the trapped. Inside cars, families hold each other tight as cold water rises slowly through the windows. Lucky survivors climb onto rooftops, looking down at the river of death below. They use flashlights and white cloth to signal for help, but the sky remains empty. A makeshift hospital is set up on high floors, but medicine and clean water run out. Looting begins as people fight violently over the last remaining bottles of soda. The National Guard tries to enter, but armored vehicles are swept away by the water. Few rescue helicopters hover, unsure where to start amidst the sea of screaming people. Water seeps into server basements, wiping out the nation's digital data forever. The FBI J. Edgar Hoover building partially collapses, classified documents floating everywhere. The Trump International Hotel, symbol of luxury, is now just a waterlogged pile of ruins. Remaining bridges over the Potomac are blocked, creating a desperate bottleneck of humanity. Embassies on Massachusetts Avenue are mercilessly attacked by the mudflow. The Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial looks out at the water, stone eyes filled with sadness. Night falls, but the city is not dark. It glows with massive, uncontrolled fires. Spilled oil from ruptured stations mixes with water, turning the river into a hellish sea of fire. Screams for help echo in the night, more haunting than the roar of the waves. Temperatures drop sharp at night. Soaked survivors begin to die from hypothermia. Helicopters shine spotlights on the water, searching for waving arms. A small rescue boat is capsized by a vortex, the rescue attempt failing tragically. The White House basement floods completely. The Situation Room submerged in silence. The final walls of water slow down, leaving a massive swamp filled with bodies. The smell of gasoline, mud, and decay begins to rise pungently. Glass skyscrapers now stand like hollow, empty skeletons against the sky. An entire generation of Capitol residents has been wiped out in one horrific night. Survivors look at each other, silent, the pain too great to express. Government paralyzed, military scattered. Washington, D.C. has completely collapsed. No longer a power center, it returns to the Stone Age in the 21st century. Sharks from the ocean begin swimming into flooded avenues to hunt. Dawn rises, shining on a dead city where life has been extinguished. Dark clouds clear, revealing a pale blue sky, cold and indifferent. A tattered American flag still waves on a construction crane, a symbol of resilience. But beneath that flag lies a muddy graveyard burying the American dream. Washington's fall is not just America's disaster, but a warning to all humanity. We built castles on sand, and now the ocean has come to collect its debt. This is the end of an era, and the start of a harsher new world. No matter how hard humans try, nature always holds the ultimate power. A black dawn covers the dead city, sunlight illuminating the Capitol's massive, gaping scars. The water recedes, leaving a meter-thick layer of mud covering every corner of civilization. Artifacts of power float aimlessly. A chair from the Oval Office, a senator's nameplate. Survivors emerge from high-rise buildings, their faces dazed and hollow like wandering ghosts. A man digs through wet rubble, searching for a fragile glimmer of hope for family. Military helicopters finally land, arriving to collect bodies rather than save lives. Scientists warned us, but arrogance forced humanity to pay the ultimate, most expensive price. Washington, D.C. may be rebuilt, but this wound will carve into human memory forever. Nature has spoken, and the only remaining question is, which city will be next? Subscribe to the channel to prepare for the next catastrophic scenarios.